Hello everyone, and thank you for joining XROM-Podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Avil. XROM-Podcast is designed to celebrate, showcase, and shape the AR, VR, MR industry and to help you understand and learn about this transformational technology which holds potential to change the way we live, work, and play. It was super awesome to converse with Vinay Narayan, Vice President, Platform Strategy and Developer Community at HTC Vive, a customer-focused product strategist responsible for commercialization and market penetration strategies for HTC Vive. He also mentors and is an advisor to a host of AR, VR, MR startups. I apologize for the audio-video disturbances, and I wish you enjoy the conversation. We are a country of 1.3 billion people, and it's growing. The AR, VR, MR market, though it's in a nascent stage, it's growing rapidly, and I've been fronting or evangelizing this ecosystem over here through the ventures, with Immersive VR Fest, which was held last year. We had around 600 people coming for across the 2-day event. We had Google India AR VR Head, which did the keynote. Facebook International got to know about the event. They came down. And how do you see India as a market, and what are your plans for India?
Yeah, I think India continues to be a major market for really all emerging technologies, and especially for HTC. We've had our presence in India from our mobile days, and of course, one of the first areas that we've also looked at in our ventures into virtual reality, and as we kind of expanded our VR platform strategy. So I think India ends up being sometimes a bit of a challenging market. A lot of it's because there's so much talent, there's so much opportunity, but we're definitely seeing a lot more growth overall, as you've kind of seen in the last couple of years, with government institutions being much more involved in promoting the development of XR. We do have an APAC and Asia and Middle Eastern Vive accelerator that also is focused around serving the needs of the region as well. So definitely we think India is a prime market. We see a lot of our companies here in Western markets also continue to leverage a lot of great talent in India. I think a lot of the applications though that we see for XR, they're not that, especially the ones that grow significantly, they're not region specific, meaning they're region agnostic. So you can use those use cases, those workflows in other parts of the world as well. So I think one of the areas that India can really benefit from in terms of that presence and technology adoption is really adapting the technologies to definitely meet the needs of local use cases, but also kind of help to fit in to a global landscape. Because the journey for XR and on a lot of emerging technologies isn't just about the POC or the proof of concept, it's about what's next. So oftentimes as companies look to invest in emerging technologies, they're looking at what's the next iterations of that. So oftentimes the next iterations is scale, it's offshore or multidisciplinary deployment. So it's the ability to plug into kind of this global ecosystem is really where the opportunity for growth for India really is. Because the talent is definitely there, the desire is definitely there, and it's just, I think some of it though, it's honestly just a matter of time. I mean, you have some bright companies in India doing some really major things, pioneering the way. There's a company that I was involved with early, SmartVizX, doing architecture. Yeah, doing architecture for VR and really kind of rethinking how building design and space design really should be. And it should be in a much more immersive, collaborative environment. So you have great companies like this that have been in this space. But unlike app development, XR development is a little bit more involved. And it has nothing to do with the technology, but more has to do with how the technology is deployed and implemented. Because a lot of these solutions are enterprise first, enterprise technologies just take a little bit longer to build and then to deploy. And of course, once they're deployed, you don't see them in the open market like you do for consumer-facing apps or app stores.
So you know what, Vinay, I mean, at this point of time, Unity has got a big presence over here, right? They for the last couple of years, they have that Unite India conference and stuff like that. So you mentioned about Vive Accelerator and Vive Developers Day. Do you have any plans of bringing that to India anytime soon?
Yeah, so I think when it comes time for our accelerator, a lot of our accelerators, while they may be strategically placed. They're not country specific. So, for example, we have an accelerator, ViveX, in the San Francisco office that's really focused for Western markets. We have one in Tel Aviv that's a region for the region and not just for that particular country. We have a couple in China as well that are really kind of serving those areas. So a lot of it has to do with much more of a cross-functional developed area. So the ViveX in those regional areas is definitely for not just for those countries, but for kind of the global ecosystem, if you will, and definitely for teams in that area. So I think we're definitely excited to pull. You don't have to be located in those countries to apply for ViveX. And if you kind of see a lot of our ViveX companies, we have our cohort based out of San Francisco that has teams from Eastern Europe, from Central Europe, from Asia. So you don't have to be in that city or the country to be part of ViveX.
You mentioned the problems. Yeah. So at this point in time, AR, VR being in such a nascent stage, there's so many problems, and which needs to be solved, right? For example, I'm going to talk about Oculus. Accessibility is a huge problem over here. So, for example, if I need to acquire an Oculus, which retails at around somewhere around Oculus Quest, which retails around $399. Here, if you get on Amazon, it's completely directly double the rate. So it goes on to around $850 or $900. The same thing is, by the way, is with HTC Vive, right? So if you want to acquire a HTC Vive, it's directly double the rate, because there's customs issues, there's GSTs and stuff like that. So is HTC looking to solve that problem? Because that's a huge problem for us as a startup, for a developer, content creator, or possibly like an institute and enterprise is looking at acquiring products. Accessibility is a huge problem. So I personally have been looking at it, and I've recently set up e-commerce online shop platform where you can kind of get all the products for AR VR which is available worldwide over here. But it's very difficult, unless until you have players like you guys setting up over here. So are you looking at distributing or selling, bringing HTC Vive over here in India?
Yeah, well, we actually currently do have distributors and partners in India and in the region that are selling Vive products as well as HTC services as well. And some of the challenges that you've mentioned around the challenge with importation tax, duties, customs, those are definitely not unique to XR. And sometimes, I look at, we get in this trap of thinking a lot of the challenges in XR are unique to XR. And so then we don't realize there's a lot of good best practices or solutions that are right next to us. And so I think while the challenge of having prices overseas being sometimes half the cost of what they can be in region, that's not unique to XR. And I feel like there's been examples of other products where very creative developers and entrepreneurs have been able to solve that challenge, right? So it's not you mentioned some other OEMs as well that actually have similar challenge with higher prices in India. And I think those are not something that's imposed by the manufacturer or the OEM, right? That's just a challenge you have with the region. And I also feel as though when we look at product adoption and price being the challenge, I think for a consumer market, price is definitely something you should be a major consideration. But enterprise and VR, and especially XR, that's really your first industry's enterprise use cases. So the value, the ROI of implementing an XR solution should really outweigh any cost of implementation. So I think if we can really change the dialogue, whereas we as HTC may not be able to impact or affect the prices, the import taxes, or at the end of the day, just your MSRP that you have, we can help to really drive the value of an investment that you make using an XR platform. So that way you're countering the initial hardware costs with the value you're providing to your customers or to the use case, and really coming out with a positive ROI.
Viveport Infinity is being called the Netflix of VR, and that's content specific and it's consumer focused. So where does that stand, and what's the future vision of Viveport Infinity?
Yeah, I think Viveport, especially Viveport Infinity, has really addressed some of the challenges, the pain points that consumers have in the XR space, and that is they want content and a lot of it, and they want to be able to explore and try so many different things. And the Viveport team is just done a phenomenal job of really creating a model or a plan that's really addresses what consumers want. They want unlimited content, right? And developers also want that level of exposure. So we were really able to address kind of two major opportunities in the space, which is what do developers want? Exposure. What do consumers want? Easy access to content. So Infinity has had great success this year. We've seen quarter-over-quarter subscription growth pretty significant. We've seen also developers have great exposure to content that users would not otherwise try. In VR especially, content doesn't really fall within the old paradigm of role-playing games or strategy games or first-person shooters. Everything is slightly different. And because of that, you have new content categories that are also exciting that you wouldn't think of to try. And the Viveport Infinity plan has really exposed consumers to a wide variety of types of content that they did not know they'd be interested in, whether it's educational content, whether it's virtual yoga, whether it's other applications that are amazing and fun to use in VR that you wouldn't have thought to purchase. And that's been great for developers because, we've seen a lot of great devs putting a lot of great development skills into new categories of content. So I think that continues to be a great way for consumers to find new ways to explore content in a manner that's very intuitive for them as well. And developers have also.
So Vinay, I mean, AR, VR, MR, it's in a very nascent stage at this point in time. There's quite a lot of problem, right? I mean, it's the people who understand technology and who are into the business actually know what AR, VR, MR is, and out of that ecosystem, hardly anybody, any people know about it, right? I mean, and we are so living in a bubble in this point in time. Nobody actually cares, except for the ones who are in the technology. So, what should be done to introduce more newer audience and make people understand, whether it's consumer or enterprise, that AR, VR is going to be transformational? What, according to you, one should be doing to drive the ecosystem and build a community and grow the industry forward?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hope and desire for XR to grow or blow up overnight, and I think that's just not really how industries are really born. So I think the first thing to really kind of think about is, what is really XR? XR isn't a product that just needs better awareness or reducing some sort of pain points or friction points, but it's a birth of an industry. And an industry is an ecosystem of very many different players, consumers, users, etc. So understanding that needs to get built first. It's almost like building the automobile industry, right? So for the automobile industry to be a thing, roads needed to be a thing, tires needed to be a thing, gas stations, service stations needed to be a thing. So all of these things needed for really the quick expansion of consumers. So that being said, I don't think you can necessarily wait for the consumer opportunity, right? Because there's a lot of opportunities for you as an individual. As a company looking into XR, understanding the industry is really important because you know what tools are available, what some of the friction points there are, like you mentioned about the cost of hardware. Knowing that the hardware is going to be a cost, that's something you should really bake into your business model for growth. So understanding those limitations. But I think the real focus really should be your customer needs, right? So your customer needs in terms of how can you best, what is the XR solution or experience that your customer really needs? Also thinking about the iterations of that. Because if you're really focused on that need, you'll actually find success in the XR space. Because if you look at the industry as a whole, there is actually a tremendous amount of growth. And then there's some use cases, some verticals that have seen a lot of growth. And automotive is a great example of this. Automotive industry uses VR for all sorts of design collaboration. They use it on the manufacturing lines. They also use it in some instances, even in the showrooms. So when you look at certain verticals that have such in-depth integration, the adoption challenges don't really seem to be that prevalent because it's a solutions-first approach. So knowing what the hardware opportunities are, the limitations are, software actually is evolving as well, and then when to really plug in to the overall workflow. Companies that have been very successful in the XR space have understood that VR and AR, they are a tool as a part of an overall solution. So they're not necessarily a solution that replaces everything else that you're doing. So I feel like as though if you understand that aspect, then you can really understand how your tool fits into that ecosystem and how to grow it and how to develop it. Because companies, and I say companies a lot because the growth in terms of those purchasing your experiences or your hardware solutions is really going to start in the enterprise space. And then your enterprise customer, think about what they need outside of what you're trying to provide them and how will they implement it. And implementation can be pretty complex. So that's, I think, from a perspective of a startup or an entrepreneur trying to get into the XR space. But there's also work that we're doing as an industry player and definitely as an industry leader, which is really bringing other thought leaders into the space, making development easier. I mentioned earlier about some of the partners that we've worked with, Tobii for eye tracking, NVIDIA for processing, AMD, Unity, Unreal, Qualcomm. We are working with all these types of partners to make it a lot easier to adopt these technologies, to make integrations a lot easier. And so just in general, just trying to build and expand that ecosystem so that you can try new ideas, you can implement faster. So there's a combination between what you can do, what the industry is doing. And I think lastly, because there's so many moving parts, some of it is just time, right? So it's going to take some time for you to see the large growth that everyone's kind of hoping that will happen overnight. But stable industries don't really do that, right? You saw what happens when an industry hockey sticks real quick. Like you saw that with cryptocurrency, right? So cryptocurrency went from nothing to really huge, what felt like overnight, and you kind of saw that burst, and then now kind of going back down to reality about what are real use cases. So whenever you have more consistent growth, you can have accelerators there, of course, but consistent growth is more akin to stable industry growth. And we're finally seeing that in XR projections for 2020 and beyond. So that's actually, these are really great signs that the industry is very healthy and that it's growing. But we are also seeing new categories of XR development. You're seeing all-in-one headsets come out this year. You're seeing a lot more AR tools on mobile devices. I mean, there's a reason why your phones cost as much as they do, right? They're 40% more in some instances than 2 years ago because of the technology that's actually on your phone, right? It's not some sort of marketing ploy. You have AR, computer vision technologies on mobile devices today that really will enable an AR ecosystem on mobile. And a lot of those technologies will also make their way into headset-based AR experiences.
Right. Currently, I mean, I do understand, that AR VR is growing, the trajectory is showing, and the projection is showing that it's going to be a $100+ billion industry. But do you think, there's been a lot of negative press for VR, right? I mean, there's people have written several obituaries on VR. So do you think the hype or the over expectation of something from a nascent technology is a drawback for virtual reality?
I always go back. I think the most important feedback is from your customers, right? So when we look at feedback in general from the industry, rarely do you see negative feedback from those actually using the system or using the tools or implementing those tools, right? So I think they're just kind of conjectures or guesses around what someone thought it should be and where you really ended up. What we see, because we spent so much time with our customers, our partners, literally the opposite. Of course, you see some pain points and some friction points in adoption. Like it'd be easier if some complexities were diminished. But that's why you have iterative product life cycles. That's why you have partnerships that you brings other innovations into the space. We're talking about gesture tracking this year. We're talking about eye tracking this year. And with eye tracking, for example, you really reduce the need to actually use your controllers, right? So those are key innovations that really help the overall growth. So I definitely don't agree with any of the industry projections saying things didn't increase as quickly as they predicted, because the reality of it is those that are actually investing in this space, those actually using the technologies are seeing growth. And we also did not over-expect some sort of magic inflection point for industry growth to happen. So from our perspective, growth's actually been very positive. And as a percentage year over year, we continue to see year over year growth, not just with HTC, but of the ecosystem, as well as with our partners and with our customers.
Right. So VR is a very data hungry technology, right? It takes up a lot of data. Do you think 5G will kind of benefit it and kind of push drive the ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. We've been doing some great work in 5G over at HTC. Earlier this year at Mobile World Congress, we showed the first 5G to VR headset streaming use case. And so what we did there, we took our all-in-one headset to focus and actually stream content from our 5G network. So that was actually a lot of fun, but also goes to show that this technology is real. It actually does solve a real use case. Because 5G, I think there's a misconception that 5G is just a faster internet or faster 4G, but 5G is much more complex and much more robust than that. If there's any key takeaway from 5G is while previous versions of network technology may be akin to a single lane highway, 5G is a much more multi-lane highway where each lane has different speeds of traffic, even different lane sizes. So what that really allows technology to do is to start to decouple some of the complexities that are inherent in the high-end VR experiences. So earlier you had talked about when do we see adoption happening? Well, one of the areas you'll see adoption is when friction goes down naturally, and friction will go down when price points can go down, but price points will go down when you're decoupling some of the investment in hardware back into the cloud or into the network, meaning reducing the complexity of processing power that your PC needs to do or your headset needs to do. And 5G is a great conduit into the cloud architecture, as well as offloading some of the processing that AR headsets need to do. AR is a very bulky headset because there's a lot of technology that's being crammed on a very small device. If you can then decouple that and put that into the network, then you're going to start to see AR devices becoming a lot more similar to what consumers want, which is more glasses kind of format. So 5G will start the process of creating new use cases, but also reducing the complexity of our existing XR ecosystem, which is going to be a lot of fun and also open up a lot of different opportunities, not just for better XR use cases, but I feel like a lot more in new integrations of technologies that will take advantage, like next generation IoT, for example. Currently in our homes, we have so many connected devices, but they're connected by software that's really owned by just a handful of companies. And 5G really helps to kind of create that communication layer that really allows a more cohesive ecosystem, if you will. And then you start to see things really work together without being so app driven and so a very, very specific technology set driven. And of course, when you talk about 5G and the processing power or offloading the processing power, AI ends up having a great part of that conversation as well. And we're definitely exploring what happens when you combine technologies that have onboard processing, as well as how can you do faster split rendering, more efficient split rendering. So just working with the companies that we've been working with, NVIDIA, with Unity, Unreal, with AMD, Qualcomm. These are all great partners to have that make these technologies a lot easier for developers to use. Because it's one thing to build something, it's another thing to be able to implement it, and there's another thing to make sure that it's easy for developers and industry partners to be able to use those technologies. So we feel as though technology is great, but we need to make sure technology is meaningful and that consumers, as well as those working with technology, have a very clear way to be able to integrate that into their solutions.
So you also, besides the VR, you're also heading the 5G, AI, and AR initiative. So can you, do you see AI converging with VR and pushing the ecosystem forward?
Well, yeah, I think AI is these are technologies that are complementing. You don't even have to use them, but they're a subset, and I feel like AI is a very generic term for a lot of different technologies. So, for example, if you're using gesture tracking or gesture recognition, then you must use computer vision, and computer vision is a core component of AI, right? And so that computer vision allows you to understand what type of environment you're in. So that way you can differentiate your hands from your living space. So that's a very core and key component of that. So of course AI is going to be an aspect of that. And earlier I talked about eye tracking, and eye tracking also means a lot more data to process, right? So that data processing can really benefit from advanced analytics, as well as from AI as well. So there's a lot of technologies and use cases and efficiencies that AI can be integrated with. But also, too, if you look at what AR is also doing, AR is also integrating into things like Azure Cloud that actually has a lot of AI capabilities there in as well. So AI isn't definitely unique to XR in sense that it's a very specific subset of it. It's integrated, it's seamless, and I think at this juncture, a lot of these technologies are table stakes for natural, more intuitive experiences.
Right, right. So, right now, I mean, because we have so many devices with which we can experience augmented reality. That's the conversation which is being pushed forward. I mean, so Apple is saying they're going to come up with their AR glasses, presumably 2022. Facebook is looking at launching their AR glasses somewhere around the same time. We have Microsoft, we've got Magic Leaps, and so many other companies which is looking at AR. Is HTC also looking at developing an AR glasses?
Yeah, I think so. We don't comment on future roadmap, but I think a lot of it, what we're trying to do is really bring the most of immersive experiences to any products that we build. So right now, product ecosystem, we have PC-based headsets, we have mobile all-in-one based headsets, and we've had actually AR-based technologies in our headsets for quite some time. So I think when the industry is ready and it makes sense, we're very open to using very many different types of technologies. But I think it's fair to say everyone in the XR space is familiar with looking into some sort of what you'd consider more of an advanced AR strategy. So it's definitely not foreign, and a lot of those technologies and concepts overlap. So while we don't comment on future roadmap, we're very familiar with AR.
With the launch of Quest, the Untethered VR headset, do you think that's the future? Yeah.
I think there's a great aspect of untethered VR headsets, right? So I think what you get a chance to see is the goal for XR really is about immersion. That's mental engagement. So how do you bring the most amount of immersion? And there isn't really one product type at the moment that's going to be overly dominant versus the other. Because if you're looking at some of the advanced technologies that we talked about earlier, integrating AI, integrating computer vision, integrating eye tracking, a lot of those industry first, for example, are much more at home with PC-based VR headsets, especially when it comes to the level of integration, visual fidelity, the ability to add peripherals and other accessories. So you have much more of that robust experience in PCs. The all-in-one movement, of course, I mean, we definitely see a lot more powerful all-in-ones happening. I think it's kind of foolish to think that eventually VR headsets will not be some version of all-in-one, whether it's distributed processing in the cloud with an all-in-one headset. So that makes a lot of sense. I think the goal right now, though, is really to pay attention to our customers that are using and building and investing in XR products, to making sure that not just they have the best hardware, but they have the relevant hardware with the right software platform that gives them the level of tools, integration capabilities, and ease of use that they need to really build a business around their investment.
Right. Just for speculation's sake, I mean, everybody's saying eventually your phone and your computer is going to converge into one wearable device. Maybe the fidelity of the glasses that you're wearing, possibly then maybe it's going to go on to something, maybe like a chip inside you where it could have brain-computer interface, or maybe it could, this is a futuristic scenario. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, I think, at this point, anything is definitely possible. There's so many converging things that actually happen. While I think the technology can eventually get to a certain point, but, sometimes we have to ask ourselves the human question, right? We ask, how do you build something? But sometimes we don't ask why, right? Mm-hmm. And, the fact of the matter is, while AR, when glasses become this small and are powerful, that's going to be an amazing thing. But not everybody wants to wear glasses. And so I think always that human element to things. I mean, imagine seeing everyone wearing glasses walking around now. There may be great times, use cases, or situations where people would actually use that, especially if the form factor is so small and easy to use. But I think, while there's going to be a time when form factor is going to be very small, I don't also expect everyone to feel compelled to use it, right? I think what this version with XR really will enable us to do is to be better connected and to be people again versus actually having unnatural interfaces like a phone. Well, we're so used to using a phone, it's a very unnatural movement, right? Say computers and other kind of screens where they're not a part of you. So while XR technologies will make it more a part of us, I think we'll be more part of each other as a human society than being more digitally dependent.
Right. So again, I'm just going to extend the conversation a little bit. I mean, Elon Musk is forefronting Neuralink. Where he's talking about possibly building a technology where he's going to be able to read up the entire cognitive structure, how neurons and synapses play out, and then possibly building an interface, onto a computer. And do you see that kind of? I mean, I see it as inevitable because throughout history, we've been augmenting ourselves. Right from the beginning, ladies, they cannot go out without their makeup, right? I mean, stuff like that, or enhancing themselves, or even men, I mean, we would love to, I mean, we boast, and sexually, there's ways where we can enhance ourselves and stuff like that. Do you see a future where, with all of these converging technologies, right from, synthetic biology, where you're talking about, building, design of babies, and regrowing organs, xenotransplantation, things like that, with nanotechnology coming in, and AI on the verge of possibly becoming from narrow intelligence space to artificial general intelligence, things like this. I mean, though it's all speculation and we don't have any timelines at this point in time, do you see a world where whatever was shown in Black Mirror coming true in another 30 or 50 years' time?
I think from just being a professional in both platform strategy, product strategies overall, you have to have a very long horizon. And that horizon also has to teach you a couple of things. One, to be open to change and listening to the market, right? What do people want? And most importantly, what do they need? And what's actually possible? The other thing, though, is also not to be overly distracted about all the things that can happen and really focus on what should happen. And I think that really balances out a lot of the speculative technologies that are out there. I don't think there's just one version. But it kind of answering your Black Mirror reality, that's just that's a subset, that's a lens more so than the natural reality of technology, right? Because if you were to take a show and just only do automobile deaths or things that the negative impact of automobiles, you would really feel like, oh, the invention of cars is really horrible, right? So if you take one aspect of a use of a technology or a tool and just really focus on the negative, then it can feel negative. But there's always positives, and we just need to be more responsible of when we think about these technologies, when to use it, how to use it, and why to use it. We have the power and capability as even non-engineers and very product-centric role to be part of the conversation and to ask, what should we build, right? So I think the dialogue, people are getting a lot more better versed in what technology is and how it actually impacts them. So I think that being said, anything is really possible for technologies, and I don't think more technology or different technology should force us to think of a dystopian world, really. I look at things as various opportunities, because a lot of these technologies today, like AI sometimes gets a bad rap, but there's some amazing companies in Eastern Europe, for example, that are coming together to use computer vision. So when you have a clothing store, an app, then you can actually get accurate measurements. So consumers across the world can trust in your product. And all of a sudden, very small, bespoke companies can produce high quality that are distributable across the world because you trust that. And a lot of it has to do because of computer vision. So there's really important ways to be able to implement technology for the greater good. I think it's going to be a big responsibility for lawmakers and decision makers to understand how technology works, and not just ask their kids or their neighbors around, what do you think this means? But to really be much better versed into how things work. And also too, I think, you mentioned kind of so much augmentation of the human spirit, right? But oftentimes the best experiences are one where you're very disconnected. And that's also part of the human spirit. And I think that we will be a society where we'll continue to have choices. We'll continue to enjoy life with our technology, life without our technology. And I think, though, when I look at this next wave of technology, I look at it from the ability to empower those that may not have access to technology or tools before. Not just from a product perspective, but the ability to build. I think what's really exciting about AI and XR is you don't need to have an overly technical background to create something. And because of the great tools and APIs that are out there, also because of you have a very natural and human interface with XR. So when you kind of start to combine the power of AI, the natural interface of XR, and the really good tools that Unity and Unreal, partners like NVIDIA and ourselves that have really been able to build, you can actually create something in a weekend and actually change your own perspective, if not the perspective in the lives of others.
So you know what, we have around 150 odd startups over here in India, and like I mentioned, we have some pretty decent startups, innovative startups who are doing some really unique stuff. And you were mentioning that startups obviously needs to be completely ready to be mentored. So is there any way you think you or people like you would be looking at India? Because like I mentioned, there's around 150 odd startups and it's growing, and the ecosystem could be pushed if these startups could be mentored and could be pushed to a level where they could scale their business. So do you see that, as a possibility? Are you looking at that opportunity, because you are mentoring SmartVizX, right?
So I was. So I think, a lot of, good mentors and opportunities is really about finding your right time and place, helping a company move along, and then really kind of being able to transition off to something else. So SmartVizX was a company, especially in the early stages, that we worked a lot together. What an amazing experience to work with Diti and Gautam on their vision, and being able to see two really brilliant architects to use XR solution, and then start to kind of build and grow that business. So, for me, my goal there was to really help them with understanding the XR landscape and understanding a lot of the common pitfalls of starting an XR company. And then they're really set up really well to be successful because they understood the space really well. They had a vision for XR pretty early. And, and as good founders, they understood their customer and they understood how to build scalable teams. So it was a really fun journey working with them. But they also think a good mentor and a good mentee, it's really about a point in time. And so since then, though, I've worked with Embright Infotech, which is the newest company that I've worked with in India. And they really also kind of fall into that model for me that's really well, is that you have companies that actually have a decent amount of experience. They've been using Vive, for example, for 2 years alone, let alone some of the other solutions. And they also have really compelling use cases for battling or treating autism. There's a host of other technologies. They understand technology really well. Their founders and co-founders are very sound from a business standpoint. So so I have personally worked with in terms of mentoring so additional companies as well. And so I think a good mentor isn't someone who's trying to stay on for a very long time, but really help you to identify what challenges you have and how can that mentor help you with those challenges, right? Because a mentor and a director on the board or a board member or advisory board, those are also different aspects. Because a board member, for example, is somebody who's really responsible for making sure that the business is flourishing, that's actually being able to be established, that those that are investing, that those funds are being used responsibly. So there's a different kind of level of engagement in those areas.
Right. So what is the future roadmap for you of HTC Vive, and do you have like a personal moonshot?
So before I answer that question, I think there's a couple of things, takeaways that I wanted to include in the mentor stuff. So I think, for companies, I think that want to get mentored, there are organizations that I think that I recommend you to look up and actually find. So one of them is the VRARA. So that's a group, that's a global group that actually aligns a lot of local chapters that are bringing in the best of XR practitioners as well as enthusiasts in the space. So that's a great place an organization to join.
Start from, right.
Yeah, and those are great ones to go into because you'll find those that are that are qualified, I would say, to be mentors, right? So they have the experience or the understanding and the ability to convey knowledge. The other thing too, I think, is probably a bigger opportunity for companies is if you're looking for a mentor, I would first ask yourself, are you ready to be mentored? And that's sometimes a challenge. You don't want to waste your opportunity to get a mentor and not be ready to take in advice or not be ready to know what you need from somebody. It can be a bit of an exercise to ask yourself, if I could get help from somebody, what would it be? And I think the ability to articulate that, then match it to somebody who has that skill set, because you may have a host of mentors, right? As an individual or as a company. Yeah, and it's okay to even have a mentor where you just touch base twice a year because they have that perspective. And then there's some mentors you need to reach out on a very regular basis. So understanding what you need from a mentor is very important, and also understanding the frequency of that need. And then lastly, being able to take in that information and make it actionable. Because one of the things is sometimes I shy away from companies that are too early in their journey is because they're not quite ready yet to take in that perspective, just because they haven't, XR is so exciting. When you build something, especially as an entrepreneur, you know it's the solution. And sometimes you overlook some of the more basic and obvious things that, as a mentor, you can almost feel like a parent. Oh, did you remember to do this, or this thing is really important? And they can feel very tactical, but they definitely build. Because there's some consistencies between companies that have been successful in the space and the companies that are capable of being successful, but have not quite made that pivot, right, if you will. And also, XR, for the most part, is an enterprise sales cycle. In an established industry, enterprise sales is 6 to 18 months before you make one sale. And so you just kind of have to be ready for that kind of longer journey. And also sometimes have the appetite to add additional lines of revenue. They may be consulting or maybe some one-off projects that you may not be as passionate about, but also finding that kind of right balance of funding versus getting too much funding, right, and giving up control of your company, and then but not having enough funding so you can't really pursue your passion and your dreams.
Right. So yes, so lovely, Vinay. Thank you for doing this. Sincerely appreciate talking to you. So before we end, any personal moonshots, and where do you see yourself in the next 10 years, and the company HTC?
No, I think a couple of things. I think I'll start with HTC. I think HTC has always been poised to really bring the best of innovation into the market. A lot of it has to do with culture. I think when you're a company that generally wants to help people with tools that are going to change their lives, you always have a great trajectory. So that vision is also very important. It's a core component. If you ever worked with anybody from HTC, there's something consistent about how easy to work with and how fun it is to work with HTC team members, because there's this real desire to help others. The other core kind of tenet for HTC is we also want to be an ecosystem creator, and to create an ecosystem that is open and community first. So we want to make sure that we're also creating tools that allow you to create tools on top of that. And so one way we do that, we also work with the best partners in the world to make sure we're bringing their industry best practices, their vision as well, and really being an integration for that, right? So if you look at the next 10 years, there's so many opportunities for growth. There's definitely the 5G space. There's the couple of different ways of XR that you're going to see. You're going to come to a point where headsets become very small and portable, and decoupled from their more physical hardware limitations. You're going to see a host of new use cases. And of course, there's the content ecosystem. And you mentioned 5-port Xfinity earlier, but really redefining how people are going to be consuming content in this new immersive world and immersive age. So those are all really fun things that HTC is part of. And the way I kind of look at the industry evolving overall as a whole, if there's anything that I think anyone could take away from, is that when we look at these new technologies, always ask yourself, I always tell people to ask yourself three things. Define what it means to you. So have a definition of what does computer vision mean to me? What does AR mean to me? What does VR mean to me? And know that this is going to be an ever-evolving definition. And be really disciplined in breaking all those concepts down. Same thing, not just with technology, but it could also mean about the customer funnel, right? The user journey. What do those things mean to you? And as you meet more and more industry leaders, collaborators, or people that just inspire you, they can add to that definition. And then ask yourselves around, why is it important to me? because that's another thing. There's a lot of things we may be interested in, and there's certain things that are a little bit more relevant in terms of information of when to actually implement it. And then there's the timing. When? When do you use these technologies, right? Into what level? If you can really get really honed in onto those three things, then you're really going to start to see opportunity before others see it, because you're going to actually have a framework that evolves, and that's always going to be relevant. Because these technologies, they're going to evolve, they'll come and go. But your perspective of how to impact the customer, that's really your competitive edge. So be really passionate about the problem you're trying to solve, and be more fluid with the technologies that you use, and also be a little more fluid in how you can integrate those technologies. But most importantly, be passionate. There's an amazing journey with XR, and I'm happy to be part of that and to enable the growth.
Lovely. Thank you, Vinay. Sincerely appreciate you being part of XROM-Podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation. So I'm sure the listeners will enjoy this too. And if you like what you hear, please press the subscribe button. I'm going to have all the details of Mr. Narayan down below so you can reach out to him, because this is about building a community and push driving this ecosystem. So thank you for joining XROM, and see you guys next time. Bye-bye. See ya. Thank you. Thank you, Vinay.